Hello, my dear friends. When I say to you Franciscan spirituality is interspiritual, what I'm saying is Franciscan spirituality is more than interspiritual. It's interfaith. It's interreligious. It's all-encompassing. It's all-embracing. Why is that? Well, some time ago, I found a very interesting article in doing some research for our own community, the Teo community of St. Francis. And our community came together when St. Francis spoke to our heart and asked us to reach out to all faiths like he did. And this happened to me in April 2008, when we were guided to set up a lay monastic community for brothers and sisters of different faiths to come together and embrace one loving God, and to try and eradicate the divisions that exist within the whole interspiritual community. Now, I know St. Francis, if you read his life story, you can't help but be impressed. A fascinating story. But yet, from my own research, apart from Jesus, the barefoot Galilean, whom I would say was the founding father of interfaith, as demonstrated in his parables, in particular the one with the Samaritan woman, how he upset the Jewish community by daring to embrace a non-Jewess. But however, coming back to Francis, we know from research, we know from his life story, that Francis had one thing in common: the love of his God. But he also shared another love. And that love has carried on to this day through the Franciscan lineage, going right back to the 13th century. And Francis had a great love for Rumi. And his love was demonstrated in his own poems, and in how he gathered his little brothers together and St. Clare, her little sisters, together. And to this very day, if you were privileged to go to a Colatine community of Poor Clare nuns, as I have been many times here in the UK, where my spiritual director then lived in Harden in North Wales, where the sisters would dance the canticles of the creatures and the psalms from the Old Testament, just like the whirling dervishes. And interestingly, in the research that I found, it says Rumi's school of whirling dervishes was in full operation in Asia Minor, and its founder was still alive during the lifetime of Francis. But here is the puzzling, spinning tale. Francis was walking through Tuscany with the disciple Brother Massio, poor Brother Massio. And when they arrived at the fork in the road, one path led to Florence and another to Arezzo, a third to Siena. And you'll never guess what poor Brother Massio had to do. He had to perform the act of a whirling dervish and spin, not once, but several times. And then when he heard the word stop, it was facing Siena. And that's what Francis said, this is where God calls us. So off to Siena they went. But poor Massio was left spinning in his poor head, as many of us are today. But it also says that Francis felt the source of his troubadour inspiration to lie in the East, and that he was connected with the Sufis. And it seems clear from much evidence that when he went to the Pope trying to have his order accepted, he used a parable which shows that he must have been thinking in terms of the orphaning of a tradition and the need to re-establish its reality. The phrases which he uses in the parable are of Arabia, and the terminology of a king and his court, of a woman and her sons in the desert, is not Christian but Saracen, Muslim. But you know, according to Francis, he believed, yes, Francis of Assisi believed that the Sufis are an esoteric Christians out of the desert, and that they are the children of a poor woman, Hagar, wife of Abraham, because of their Arab descent. And it fits completely with the probability that Francis had tried to explain to the Pope that the Sufi stream represented Christianity in a continuing form. Francis loved Sufi. Francis loved their esoteric way of worshipping God. But underlying that was his love of Rumi. And if you've read any of Rumi's poems, then you will find a connection in the softness, in the similarities of Francis's writings to his little brothers. So Franciscan spirituality is so different to Benedictine, Dominican, Redemptorist, Jesuit, to all those spiritualities. Franciscan spirituality is really a class act for me that has the edge. It's not better and it's not lesser, but it sees God in a completely different light. It comes to God through the elements, through nature, through the love of the sacred in the landscape, the cathedral of God. And it is here where Francis was at home, not in the ornate monasteries. I really believe that it was not Francis' vision to live in the opulent monasteries that we find today, with the ritual and the regimentation that we find. Man's ego has a lot to answer for. Francis kept it simple, and his followers were many because they were disappointed by the corruption within the Christian church, by the hedonism, the materialism, and the Epicureanism, the greed. And that came right down from the Pope, through the cardinals, the bishops, to the local clergy. The ordinary people, like today, were alienated from that mainstream spiritual belief in a loving God. And Francis and Franciscan spirituality, it's not academic, it's hands-on, it's heart-centered. And I feel so privileged to be an independent Franciscan on the outside looking in on the church. Yes, I'm a Catholic Christian, and yes, I believe and worship a monotheistic God, a God of love, not of ritual, not of academia, but of love. And Francis, for me, does that. Why does he do it? Well, look at nature and how they feel safe with him. He had an essence that was godlike. He had a simplicity that was Christ-like. And he was a natural communicator with souls. He was a true world leader. And despite being born in the 13th century, his wisdom, his philosophy, his simplicity lives on today in the hearts and in the minds and in the souls of his brothers and sisters who embrace the Franciscan rule. So I take great pride in saying to you, Francis was interfaith. Francis embraced all beliefs, and Francis had a great love of Rumi. And I pray that you too will find the similarities for yourself. Peace.